Hello, hello. Welcome back to a reading and commentary on Hidden in Plain Sight by The Ethical Skeptic. This is part 2. If you haven't seen part 1, I recommend you go check that out. I'm going to go ahead and just get started from where we left off last time. So last time we covered just an overview of what to expect from this piece, went in deep on the evidence surrounding some falsification of especially the quarry marks that are often used to support the claim that of the current timeline of the pyramids and the Khufu and Khafre sponsored building of them. Now we're going to go to another piece of the puzzle, which is on the Dixon Tomb Raider relics and the shaft stone, the displaced shaft stone. So I'm going to pick up from where I left off. Why we need actual engineers and not social scientists or YouTube video makers reviewing this critical data. Finally, and most critically, the cedar-like wood fragment, see Exhibit A3, discovered in the northern air shaft of the Queen's Chamber in the Great Pyramid of Khufu were almost certainly not remnants from the original construction. The builders of the pyramid were remarkably meticulous, with no other known instances of tool loss or incidental material left behind. Moreover, there would have been no functional need for a grappling hook or depth-sounding ball during layered block construction. These items, the so-called Dixon Relics, which include a bronze hook and dolerite ball, are far more consistent with the toolkit of ancient tomb raiders, who required exactly these types of implements. This underscores the necessity of having engineers rather than social scientists and YouTube video makers assess this type of evidence. In 1872, Wayneman Dixon and his colleague Dr. James Grant chiseled their way into the sealed Queen's Chamber shafts. They inserted a rod into the northern shaft that managed to loosen 3 objects among rubble in the shaft: a bronze grappling hook, a dolerite ball, and a short rod described as, quote, cedar-like by Dixon. Carbon dating conducted on the wood pieces in 1995 and finally confirmed in 2020 places these artifacts 650 to 900 years, that's 3341 to 3094 BCE, before the 4th dynasty of Pharaoh King Khufu. Interesting. Should be noted that the oldest part of even a 500-year-old tree, an extreme 0.1% likely artifice used to make the narrative again seem plausible, will theoretically yield a 14C date roughly around the date of its cutting. The younger, and vast majority by whatever, parts of the tree aspirate and grow closer to its cutting and will yield a date of its cutting. After cutting, dead wood, in a tool for instance, is permeated by microbial decomposition, working oils, human contact, fungal colonization, and chemical exchange, which will date up to hundreds of years after its cutting. These contaminants are inevitable and cannot be removed by acid-alkali acid pretreatment. So basically what he's saying here is that, if you have a tool made of wood, then it's going to get permeated over time by other sources of carbon besides just the carbon of the tree itself. So the assumption that, okay, if we carbon date a chunk of wood that was taken from a tree and used for a tool, that, the only carbon date you're going to get back is going to correspond to when that tree was cut down, that's not necessarily true. But in any case, I'll continue. Neither the cedar-like plank itself nor any of the radiocarbon or thermoluminescence dating results, ranging from 3450 to 4400 BCE, and corroborating the plank's cutting and use antiquity, align with the established 4th dynasty or Old Kingdom narrative. Interesting. So the pieces of wood lay at the bottom of the sloping section of the shaft, suggesting they were dropped from a higher access point, along with a considerable amount of rubble and a displaced slide block, blue wedge block in Exhibit A4 below, resulting from a previously undetected side penetration into the northern shaft. These 3 items, along with the displaced block itself, would have been easily retrieved through the mostly straight and level access from the Queen's Chamber, as Dixon himself was able to accomplish. Thus, it is unlikely that such access was utilized in the deposition of these artifacts. In fact, this access was still sealed from construction when Dixon detected it. While there exists a layman teaching that this displaced side block simply, quote, broke and fell out, unlike any other block in any other air shaft, the kinetic vectoring of the fragments and hand chiseling to 3 non-exposed sides out of 4 while still in situ belie this possibility. The stone did not break, as it was found fully intact with all sides in a finished condition, save for the chiseling divots. I'm going to click this image here to take a look. So we have these little grappling hook devices that were found. This block, and there's looks like little chisel marks here. Some ball. Sounding ball. Not really sure what a sounding ball is. I feel like I should know that. Okay, so there's this chamber. This block that fell down here in the chamber. Okay. So he thinks unknown access. Okay, we'll get down to the details here. The specialty block, which served a clear functional purpose, was evidently pre-chiseled, pried from the rear, and forcibly dislodged from its eastern face, despite the later sealing of the access hole, whether by ancient tomb raiders, a well-documented practice, or by modern archaeological interference. If the caretakers are willing to suppress video evidence of this displacement gap from the public, it follows that they would also be willing to tamper with the physical evidence before it is ever scrutinized. Such professional misconduct within archaeology is likewise well attested. So, I'm actually not going to read more of the details from this, but basically what he's saying is that this block clearly came from a different passage. And that it was dislodged by tomb robbers at some point in the past, and that it likely came from is related to this void. It's also, by the way, a void that was later uncovered by LiDAR. Was it LiDAR? It was not LiDAR. No. It was like that advanced particle device. Anyway, I'm going to just kind of skip down a little bit. Basically, what he's saying here is that the block that was discovered was well before the time of Khufu's dynasty, and that evidence supports that it was either by tomb robbers or someone like that. Obviously, would have to have been quite a bit longer after the construction of the pyramids. The physical explanation for where the block came from, how it was put there, and when doesn't hold up. And I'll read a couple more passages here before going to the next section about the Sphinx. But the 4th millennium BCE intrusion that displaced this block occurred well before the time of Khufu's 4th dynasty, 650 to 900 years later, from an unknown chamber access made by tomb robbers of that time, bearing superior knowledge of Khufu's design and dimensioning. In any other discipline aside from archaeology, this would have been an Occam's razor moment, absolutely fatal to the prevailing narrative, yet this significant find is often purposely overlooked or ill-framed in favor of maintaining the established story. The Great Pyramid's tomb was already being robbed almost a millennium before it could even serve as Khufu's tomb in the first place. This is fatal to the prevailing hypothesis. As a side note, I am assured by insiders that non-public explorations and possibly even interventions have been conducted in this shaft recently. If the find has been altered, differentiating versions of these private investigation photos and videos will never be made subject to public scrutiny. Activity like this, along with Zahi Hawass's removal of the 8,300 to 12,500 year decayed copper cable segment, again, far predating Khufu's 4th dynasty, from the Queen's Chamber South Air Shaft in block during the Jetty project, stand as prime examples as to why dissenting articles such as this one are absolutely vital. Such actions compromise the integrity of both the field and the find from that point forward. As a result, archaeology has forfeited both public accountability and trust. Before moving forward, we address the enigmatic east side access to the Queen's Chamber North air shaft. We propose that, since the original trajectories of both the King's and Queen's Chamber North shafts did not initially conflict with the Grand Gallery, yet were both diverted westward with strikingly similar field modification offsets, this suggests a mid-construction addition just west of the Grand Gallery. Orange features in Exhibit A5 below. This is a void and a couple of passages here that are not currently in the mainstream accepted interior map of the pyramid. The structural intervention compelled the builders to reroute the two north air shafts, blue annotations in Exhibit A5 below, indicating a significant and deliberate modification to the pyramid's internal architecture. This suggests that a significant structural feature was inserted into the pyramid's core mid-construction and, critically, that it incorporated a horizontal to vertical service passage originating from the same plane as the irregular tunnel. I refer to this putative tunnel as the second irregular tunnel. Its vertical section likely provided the east side access to the Queen's Chamber North air shaft and may extend upward into the newly discovered void. Unfortunately, if this tunnel system was ever accessible, and it appears from the Queen's North air shaft east side entry that it was, it is likely that all of these spaces have long since been emptied of their original contents. Okay, so basically, it looks like there's evidence that there were intrusions into the Great Pyramid well before Khufu's dynasty was around, hundreds of years before at least. There was evidence for it, the tools that were left there, the copper cables, the grappling hook, and even the stone itself. All of that matches that story and does not at all match the mainstream story of it being dislodged much later. So there we go. Moving on. The Sphinx erosion and thermoluminescence coup de grace. Sphinx is always fun, right? The Sphinx is always like, it's cool, it's mysterious, and everyone's got their theories about it. But let's see what the ethical skeptic has to say. In this same manner, to a trained professional eye, the unique type of erosion we discuss later in this article indicates that the coffre depiction on the Sphinx is a repurposing of a far older monument. And so I clicked on an image, and it is showing original karst-eroded surface on the back side and bottom part of the Sphinx, where the face and headdress area has been repurposed and looks much less eroded, which I think is common knowledge. The erosion on the back of the head generally matches the karst erosion on the casing and surrounding stones used to construct both Khafre and Khufu. In contrast, the erosion and weathering on Khafre's face are minimal, even less than what is observed on the Tura limestone cap of the Khafre pyramid itself. So, as a reminder, one of the main theories about what the Sphinx represents is the pharaoh Khafre, which I think was the son of Khufu. Khufu and Khafre were both kings, father and son. Yeah, Khufu is the Great Pyramid, attributed to the Great Pyramid. Khafre is the son, second largest pyramid, and is associated with the Sphinx. Got it? Khufu, daddy, Khafre, son, and that's the theory. Okay, mainstream theory. Moving on. In contrast, the erosion and weathering on Khafre's face are minimal, even less than what is observed on the Tura limestone cap of the pyramid itself. There is no possible narrative supporting scenario in which the face of the Sphinx in its current condition could have remained so pristine compared to the rest of the edifice. Thus, the face of the Sphinx is a more recent construction than both the rest of the monument and the Giza pyramids. I can't remember if he goes into it in this article, but something I've always thought was interesting about the erosion pattern on the Sphinx is that there's these big kind of like nodules in the chest on the bottom, which to me suggests that the original erosion pattern, there was probably an overhang of some kind here, so that the rain and water wasn't impacting this kind of chest area quite as much as it did the surrounding. So I think some of the theories about it being like Anubis or a lion or, a dog or something like that with a long snout always made sense to me because of how that area seemed to be less weathered. But I digress. You can see here as well. In this linked photo from the 1920s, as well as this one from the 1950s, so this one's from the 20s, one can observe that the karst erosion occurred to the Sphinx after the construction of the original pre-dynastic monument, but before its repurposing by Pharaoh Khafre around 2500 BCE. This observation is significant and carries falsifying implications. So I'm looking at this here. Khafre's face, repurposed, not eroded. What is karst erosion? What is karst erosion? Karst erosion is a kind of landscape and geologic process where water, particularly groundwater, dissolves soluble bedrock such as limestone. Okay. So karst erosion. Okay, it's what happens when there's like limestone and stuff are dissolved. Yeah. All right. There is absolutely zero possibility that Khafre or any of his Old Kingdom contemporaries built the original Sphinx monument. The original monument existed long before their time and was exposed to a carbonic acid eroding inundation by ocean water consistent with the same type of erosion observed on the Khufu and Khafre pyramids, not a Nile River flood, nor mere weathering, but a sustained ocean inundation. Okay, so this is the first part of this theory that gets even more deeper, is that the erosion patterns we're seeing is not actually just from rainwater and it's not from the Nile, but is actually from salt water, which would have had to have come from the ocean. Similarly, hieroglyphs chiseled into the Mose 7 limestone walls of the Khafre Northwest Quarry enclosure exhibit little to no erosion or weathering. In stark contrast, less than 30 meters away, cut blocks from the same Mokattam formation show heavy karst erosion and dissolution. A significant span of time, far beyond the 200 to 1,000 years proposed in the current narrative, along with the stark carbonic acid erosion event, separates the framing of those limestone stubs from the later chiseling of hieroglyphs into the quarry walls. The contrast between the two is striking and can be observed in Exhibit A7 to the right. Exhibit A7, pristine hieroglyphs located adjacent to heavily karst dissolved unfinished stone stubs on the northwest, quote, quarry side of the pyramid. This is not possible under the current narrative. Yeah. So basically you have these this nice, smooth, hard stone wall with hieroglyphs, very detailed hieroglyphs chiseled in there. It looks very nice. And then the block stubs next to them here on the Giza Plateau they're very heavily pitted. It looks like maybe at one time they were being carved out, and then something has happened. They are pitted, they are dissolved, they are extremely weathered, and karst erosion would suggest that these are carbonic, kind of like limestone stone blocks that are very reactive with salt water, and parts of them will dissolve into patterns like this. You get this like very heavy pitting, almost like acid, right? That's what it is. Finally, thermoluminescence dating of various carved granite structures on the Giza Plateau places the last alterations to Menkaure, the last pyramid of the three to be constructed, around 3450 BCE, the time of Khufu's Tomb Raider activity, and possibly as early as 4400 BCE, well before the 4th dynasty of Khufu. This, as well, falsifies the Khufu narrative. Thermoluminescence dating. I don't really know how thermoluminescence dating works. Let me look that up real quick. How does thermoluminescence work? Okay. Measures the elapsed time since a mineral was last heated. Works by measuring the light emitted when a sample is heated, which is related to the amount of energy stored from ionizing radiation exposure. Okay, I think the idea is that work when dating structures. Okay, I don't really know the details, but it's basically used to... Okay, I see. It's useful in dating ceramics, burnt flint, and sediments. Basically, if something has been heated in the past, you can get a sense of when it was heated by thermoluminescence dating. So, yeah, still a little fuzzy on the details here, but I'm going to move on. Similar to the rewriting of history that sought to erase Pharaoh Akhenaten, much of the history surrounding these critical Giza monuments has been repurposed for dynastic nationalist exploitation. What we are witness to here is a series of skilled genocidal lies, something far worse than pop archaeologist Flint Dibble's racism. Funny, Flint Dibble. I think this article actually came out before Flint Dibble was on the Rogan podcast too, but he was making a lot of noise on social. This practice reveals why so many paradoxes exist within this subset of Egyptology. Oh, what a tangled web we weave. These issues all constitute significant problems, indicating how willing, nay, desperate, archaeology is to lie about the age of these two edifices. That being said, I have no specific hypothesis of actual construction/origin by which to counter the Khufu Khafre origin hypothesis. It remains a mystery. However, this is inherently the fault of the field and not me. Unfortunately, Egyptology has played the epistemological sleight of hand of doubling down upon a theory they know has a high probability of being wrong, through continuously juxtaposing and foisting red herring and ludicrous competing alternatives, aliens, racists, giants, internal and external ramp solutions to a workload dilemma which does not even apply, such that there never exists any real challenge to their prevailing dogma. Stooge posing as one does to prop up a less talented boxer. So basically, he's saying that Egyptologists, he doesn't really know who built the pyramids, but that Egyptologists are, not helping and making it much harder. Is it any wonder, therefore, why none of the observations which I'm about to broach from this point on have ever been raised regarding this topic? The fact that these ideas are novel is a factor which casts nothing but doubt and shame upon the entire field. One may observe an example of why archaeology is a failed science by reading this article. Okay. His Twitter page. Okay, it is evident that since the onset of the Bronze Age, some intelligence concerning this pyramid threatens the powers that rule over us, terrifying them into committing despicable acts of pseudo-epistemology. Neither aliens, ramps, nor giants, but human fingerprints. I've been the design engineer in charge of development of over 100 buildings in excess of 100,000 square feet in size. The largest facility my teams have engineered was 4.4 million square feet, that is large, take my word for it, and was much more complex than the Great Pyramid in its engineering challenge. Unlike an archaeologist, I am an expert in construction, scaling, cost, and more importantly, the direct labor involved in the assembly of large structures under a variety of working conditions and construction equipment scenarios. My teams estimated these project costs in part based upon the principle of systems engineering cost measurement called work content. Under this, a tried and true principle of engineering applies to the Khufu pyramid construction, which is shown by the escalating red parametric intersection line in Exhibit B to the right. In absence of leverage, compound advantage, or machine, work content accelerates as a function of distance and structure used to overcome both vertical loft and that total friction which results from the employed solution. All right, this is getting pretty like engineering-y, but basically I think what he's saying is that the amount of difficulty it is something is to build, the amount of energy it takes to build, is based on how much friction and how much you have to lift the material that you are using to build with. In other words, the more ramp you build, internal, external, or otherwise, in order to attain vertical loft or partly overcome friction, the more total work content you create for the overall project. The more cooks, garbage haulers, housing, and logistics/support persons you need arithmetically. If the ramp service is compromised, all work must stop until that problem is fixed. Across a mile of ramp surface suffering 2.3 million stone passes, this would be fatal to the project's critical path of completion. One also has to disassemble and or mitigate the structural harm from this putative ramp once the principal building effort is completed. That effort in itself could take decades to complete. Ramps, therefore, constitute a losing game. They are the fantasy of historians, archaeologists, and Hollywood. Another advantage must be taken instead. So he's saying basically that ramps it's just not going to work. It would be way, way, way too much work to use ramps. Horizontal stone movement was a matter of trade and production surplus versus work content. Quote, you mean to tell me, Mr. Thoth, that you will give my village guaranteed food all year long as we cut up pieces of the hillside and give them to your food delivery boats? Where do I sign? Vertical stone movement. And Thoth or Toth is actually one of the gods of ancient Egypt, the one who's kind of similar to Prometheus, the scribe, the one who is often depicted with an ibis head, ibis head, the big bird with the big beak, also associated with the moon. God of wisdom is where we get the word thought from, supposedly. Vertical stone movement, on the other hand, was a matter of slave work content alone. Risk of rebellion, disease, and especially expense all needed to be minimized. Bored armies present risk. Indeed, the challenge of the Great Pyramid resides not in the handful of 40-ton precision stones which were involved, but rather in the 2.3 million 2.5-ton stones which had to be vertically lifted into position before famine, war, pestilence, drought, or economic collapse could cause a premature termination of the political will necessary to resume such an endeavor each year. Enter the Sekhem-mu Machine, and the Disk of Prince Sabu. The Sekhem-mu Machine and its no longer missing key element. Therefore, under the non-recoverable principle entailed with work content versus friction as shown in Exhibit B, the Khufu and Khafre pyramids have been built through vertical mechanical leverage, using compound pulleys, with high saline content water and manpower for marginal fine-tuning, speed, and control as the counterweight for each stone lifted. The salt water could be pumped to the top of the structure, being built by means of a cleverly engineered Mohs Scale 7, that's a measure of extreme mineral durability, impeller from the Hor-Anigib pharaonic period, that's 400 years before the reputed building of the Khufu pyramid, called the Disk of Prince Sabu. Sekhem-mu is a portmanteau. How do you say that? Portmanteau? Can't remember. Means in Egyptian the power of water. Is this something he made up? Sekhem-mu or Sekhmet is an ancient Egyptian goddess associated with the scorching heat of sun, war, medicine, and healing. Boop, 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 boop. The Sekhem-mu Machine and its Sabu disk. So we have like a nice illustration here. And so that is, if you don't know, the Disk of Prince Sabu here, this disk is a big mystery about what exactly it was used for. Very precision made. It reminds a lot of people of some kind of machine, device or a piece of a machine, but it's never really been determined. In fact, what is the main explanation? What's the mainstream explanation for Disk of Sabu. Some ceremonial or symbolic object, of course. It was something to do with religion. Decorative object. Okay. Model or representation of something else. Cool. All right. Great one. Doing a great job there, Egyptologist. Okay, so we have a nice explanation here. So basically what the ethical skeptic is trying to say is that it is a lot easier to lift a stone like this upwards than it is to push a stone over a long period, over like a mile-long ramp or whatever the current mainstream explanation is. And so that's what he's saying here. And so what he's choosing to depict with barrels is that highly saline water, which is heavier than fresh water, which is true, right? Like if you've ever gone and tried to float in a saltwater pool, you float much more easily because the water is much more dense when it's highly saline relative to when it's not. So you have saline water, which is, he says, 35% heavier than non-saline water, and then you get a bunch of it rigged to pulleys, but you need some way to pump the water up, right? So basically you're taking the energy that you, instead of pushing the block up directly, you are, which requires a lot of energy in a short amount of time, which is very hard. You could do a little amount of energy over a little longer amount of time by just pumping water up into these counterweights to lift the block up. So that's what he's saying. I don't know that it makes sense for me to just read through all of this. I think the idea is pretty simple. I think it's compelling. A couple of things I do want to point out, though. I really like how he puts this here. I mean, one of the things is that this device was just very difficult to create. It looks like something that you would expect to be made of metal, but they made it out of an extremely hard stone. And so he says here, Egyptian Museum in Kairos, the Disk of Prince Sabu, Mose 7 quartzite siltstone is difficult and time-consuming to work into a tool. Its radial symmetry and ring structure inside planar discipline is one magnitude in difficulty above even that. These elements were neither for artisanship nor mundane function. This device is elegantly and deliberately purposed to rotate. This device is elegantly and deliberately purposed to rotate, not to be static. Any other alternative would be present an enormous waste of critical artisan focus and talent. Interesting indeed. So basically, this thing was like a precision, very difficultly handcrafted to precision device. He says, underpinning such a conjecture as this, to my educated eyes, the Sabu disk is what is termed an open design water pump impeller, like the ones I replace and repair on my boat, and not an out-of-place artifact nor alien hyperdrive. The disk simply involves a ring with rim-mounted normalized impeller vanes. Example can be found here. Interesting. Okay. Save for the normal curve taper, which imparts smoothness more compatible with muscle power as opposed to a gas-powered machine. These normalized perimeter fins are used in lieu of a spindle outfitted with center-mounted and often flexible impeller vanes. Open impellers are commonly used in applications where the fluid contains slurry or particulates. In a centrifugal pump with an open impeller, the rotation of the impeller vanes imparts kinetic energy to the fluid. This kinetic energy is converted to pressure energy as the fluid exits the impeller and moves into the pump casing, which directs the flow towards the discharge pipe. The Sabu disk accomplishes the same task by means of what would technically be called a shrouded peripheral normalized hydrofoil fin. Advantages of open impellers: better handling of stones and slurry, extended mean time between failure, easier to clean and clear on the fly, less prone to clogging. So I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. So you see, what it's trying to say is that if you have an impeller, instead of like a impeller you might get that's produced by Caterpillar or someone today that works on a boat, this one it still uses the same principles, but because it's used by people who are manually turning this impeller, which is going to be basically sucking water up and then pushing it through vertically through a pipe of some kind of hose, right? But if you spin this impeller, it should be sucking in water, and then as long as it's mounted inside of a hard casing, if there is a discharge hole anywhere else, and it's going to suck it in, it's going to push it out that discharge hole. And so that is what he's saying that this did for the purposes of pumping water from A to B. So that's interesting. I wonder if we ever try to use it for that. Let's see. The Sabu disk is clearly and unequivocally a fluid impeller designed to be used with human power. A video demonstrating its volutional displacement power and therefore net positive suction head pressure can be viewed here. Okay, let's see. Okay, so somebody did actually make this. See if I can get a good look at this. Somebody did make this. Okay, yeah. So you can see it's exactly like the Disk of Sabu, and they've mounted it to like a drill, and shown that if you spin it, it absolutely will suck water into the middle of it. Okay. I speculate that this is the reason why the Disk of Prince Sabu was regarded to be of such critical importance that it was placed in Sabu's very own tomb. Just imagine the social impact he had with this prescient device. And then he goes on to talk about why it was made of this hard stone instead of bronze. It's because the bronze would not have performed under stress. They're too soft. If they used like an iron-like metal, it would have corroded, especially with saline water. And especially if it's something that's used all day, like, you know, it's going to get hot, it's going to deform. It's, and we're talking about something that's going to be needing to perform through many thousands of rotations. So really this hard stone was actually kind of perfect for what they were trying to do. Interesting. Now, with regard to the entire machine, having worked with several heads of state in Africa, I can tell you that rulers under the risk of rebellion are not nearly as concerned about the detailed engineering and devices employed, leaving that to my teams, as they are about managing, quote, bored armies. Any wise pharaoh would be primarily concerned with the assembly of a large bored population used to haul counterweights, stones up ramps, or make repairs to frustrating solutions. Thus, the Disk of Prince Sabu is as much a political technology as it is a feat of engineering. It allowed one small team to row from machine to machine and conduct the lift right when the pumping deadhead cycle was complete for each machine, a two-person job. This system design could be minimally staffed and avoid chains of humans recovering stone weight during the machine's deadhead cycle time for each and every machine. Herodotus describes something very similar to this stone-lifting machine in his work An Account of Egypt, sans the necessary compound advantage in counterweighting. Quote, this is from Herodotus. The pyramid was made after the manner of steps which some called rows and others bases, and when they had first made it thus, they raised the remaining stones with machines made of short pieces of timber, raising them first from the ground to the first stage of the steps, and then when the stone got up to this, it was placed upon another machine standing on the first stage, and so from this it was drawn to the second upon another machine, for as many as were the courses of the steps, so many machines there were also. The insistent and baseless narrative. Such an engineering challenge is plausible with the context of a 4th dynasty project for a single large pyramid. However, this challenge is exacerbated by the archaeological claim that the 7 largest pyramids of the 3rd and 4th dynasties were all built within the same 4 decades. From a social infrastructure standpoint, this means they were essentially constructed simultaneously. Having developed numerous community burden and impact assessments for large building projects, I can attest that demands on Egyptian society for just one pyramid would have been extraordinary. Constructing 7 overlapping pyramids is a fantasy, entertained only by those who have never built anything in their life. So he's saying that like the mainstream explanation, like how many pyramids these folks could have been building simultaneously is just ridiculous. There's just no way they would have done it. Chronology of pharaohs and their burial chambers. This is the chronology of the pharaohs is shown here on a chart. Either a gigantic pissing contest, which would have destroyed Egypt as a nation, or a complete fan fiction developed by later dynastic nationalists and priests. The 5 pyramids in blue did not match the technological prowess, concealed features, and experience of the 2 pyramids highlighted by the green Gantt bars. So the ones that he's highlighting here in blue that are not as sophisticated are the Medum, the Bent Pyramid, the Red Pyramid, the Jedefre Pyramid, the Bicaris Pyramid, and the Menkaure Pyramid. The Khufu and Khafre pyramids are in green, so he's setting those apart as being especially technologically advanced. The 4th Dynasty engineers attempted to imitate what they could readily observe inside Khufu, particularly the corbelled ceiling of the Grand Gallery, but they could neither truly replicate its feats nor even more compellingly reproduce Khufu's concealed features and techniques. In short, it is absolutely clear that the Khufu and Khafre pyramids were built by humans, but if it was not the humans of Khufu's 4th Dynasty, then which humans indeed constructed these monuments? And why would the orthodoxy work so hard, lie, as we have proven above, to ensure that we remain in abject ignorance over the matter? A matter so panic-inducing that they would be willing to cast every single person who dissented as alien theorists, or racists. Perhaps there exists another clue in this regard, a clue which portends an answer to both of these questions. All right, I'm going to pause here. So what have we learned so far? Going back to the beginning, we have learned that a lot of the evidence around how old the Khufu and Khafre pyramids are is clearly crap, that any educated person who is an expert in these subjects would have been able to figure that out pretty quickly. I think what he's getting at here at the very end of the passage we just read is that it's too obvious for them to be able to plead ignorance. So it looks more likely that much of this is already known, has been known for decades or longer, which means there are willful lies being told. And so the question is, why? Why would anyone lie about the method of construction, the date of construction of the pyramids? Well, we'll leave it there for now. And perhaps in the next section, some of this might become more clear. If you've hung with me so far, thank you. We are going to resume this next week, and we're going to get into some of the really intense stuff here, I assure you. Thanks for watching. Subscribe if you haven't yet. Leave a comment. I read them all. Thanks.